There is a word most business leaders avoid because it sounds too soft for a boardroom. That word is elegance. Robert Snyder has spent 30 years proving it's actually the most rigorous thing a team can pursue. He's a Chicago based author, founder of Innovation Elegance LLC, an engineer, a Kellogg MBA, and a performing artist. And somehow, all of those things live together in his work. His book series starts with a single premise that chaos in business is not inevitable, it is a choice. And today, he's here to talk about what it actually looks like to choose differently. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inner Access. Today, I'm sitting down with Robert Snyder, and we're going to get to learn a little bit more about him and his work today. Robert, thank you so much for being with us today, for making the time, and for sharing all your insight.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started?
I'm an Illinois native, grew up in Central Illinois. My undergrad degree was at University of Illinois in Champaign. And for the first chapter of my career, did the consulting thing. So I joke that if you were to try to conceive the most generic IT consultant, I think I would come pretty close. But my secret ingredient is the performing arts. And so at the moment, I'm integrating my background in IT and change management with the performing arts because there are incredible teamwork benefits that you find in the performing arts that I believe businesses would benefit from. So that's where I'm working at the moment, is at the intersection of the performing arts and teamwork and innovation.
I love that. That is something very out of the box. What made you think about joining those two worlds together? Was there anything specific that triggered that thought process in your mind?
It started gradually because as a kid, I had always been into music. I played trombone as a kid, I sang in choirs, and I've been in plays. I've been in musicals since I was a kid. Around 2012, I joined the Latin dance community in Chicago, and around 2015, I was becoming more active in the improv scene and taking improv classes. I read the book Yes and so the combination of those four performing arts, theater, music, improv, and Latin dance, partner dance, made me feel like the intersection of these is much too valuable to just call cute. So I believe that teams that imitate a symphony, it's not cute, it's absolutely consequential. And so it started slowly as a child, but about 10 years ago was when I concluded this is much too valuable to take it casually. So I wrote a couple books, I do public speaking, and I teach now about the value of the performing arts and teamwork.
I love that. How has that been received in the IT world? Like, do you find the creative people are more drawn to that concept of combining those worlds, or has the IT world actually embraced it as something that they wanted to learn more about?
As you can imagine, the musicians in the room, they're already thinking in these terms. So what I'm providing to them and formalizing for them, they appreciate, and it's almost anticlimactic because they could have written the chapter in my book on music. I meet people who could have written the chapter in my book on theater, and so forth and so on. So I do think that the material that I present to the market, it's very intuitive for folks who are already cross-pollinating. I will admit there are plenty of people who see no relevance. They look at me with blank stares. Symphony, synchronization, what are you talking about? No, it's all about speed. It's all about franticness, and I disagree.
And I think especially now, like the climate that we're in technology, speed is being pushed at the forefront, and it creates a bit of chaos. There's a unrealistic urgency that pressures people, and we're breaking more than we're building. The foundations are very shaky. And so I feel like it's refreshing that you have this concept of performance arts you're being productive, but you're also doing it in a way that embraces individuality, creativity, and it supports change at the foundational level.
Absolutely.
When I hear you speak, when I see your content, it's always about foundation, it's always about operation, it's always the back end, because you're building something that should be sustainable, right?
Absolutely.
I know you enjoy performance arts, but when it came time to choosing a career, what made you decide to go that direction?
Well, I chose consulting and I chose programming because I was good at it, and I felt it was a stable career for that time when I finished undergrad. It's extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? There was no romance. It was strictly pragmatism and having a secure job out of college that I wouldn't need a master's or a doctorate for immediately.
Yeah.
It was practical.
And it made sense, and you grew, and you not only entered into that industry, but you built your own path.
Yes, so I've worked in corporate, I've worked in startups during the dot-com. I worked for 3 different startups during the bubble. I've worked in large consulting firms, and I've worked in small consulting firms. So very structured environments and unstructured environments. So I feel I've had a good diversity of experiences to see the variety of dysfunction that's out there.
It's real. What would a lot of our audience are small and medium businesses, right? There are a lot of founders right now, especially in Chicago. It's such a supportive city when it comes to entrepreneurship. Since you've had experience in both corporation and also in the entrepreneurship space, what are some of the things that stick out to you in terms of structure, and how do you feel people navigate those expectations when it comes to the market? And I'll go a little bit further into my question. So when you're talking about big corporate America, right, we have very big structure as well. Now, at times that can be disengaging with the market. So you're in your big office, you have your big campaign teams, your marketing team, everything's running, the machine is running, but you're not connected to the market in the ways that an entrepreneur might be, because they're hands-on, they're in it, right? When it comes to structure, and I know there's good and bad to both sides of that, how do you think it is for the person in the middle, who is the consumer of services or products? Do you think they're more drawn to the structure of corporation, or do you think entrepreneurship connects them in a more meaningful way?
All else equal, I think a consumer, customers, and stakeholders are drawn to ease, elegance. Make it economical for me, not only in terms of money, but in terms of the laboriousness. Are you easy to do business with?
Right.
Is it easy to pivot? Because many business relationships are less than perfect the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So to be safe, economically safe, logistically safe, psychologically safe, how safe is it to pivot? And this translates to low marginal cost.
Mm-hmm.
Low marginal cost isn't free. There's a decision infrastructure that's upstream, and I'll call that significant upfront cost. Now, this tiptoes into the concept of scale. Most startups, at some point, face the issue of scale. There's that ubiquitous question, can we scale this? Can we scale this? And that is an eternal question for startups through the lens of their operations.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I believe is a gaping hole in culture is that when a team is working on your new product, your new customer experience, etc., you must scale your communications.
Yes.
So there are countless teams that feel like they can talk their way to success. And how many small and medium-sized businesses are forced to rehash conversations because they shrug at the documentation? The documentation feels petty. It feels administrative. You know what? Muscle memory, whether on or off the dance floor, muscle memory, having things documented,
Yeah.
You go to a restaurant, is the written menu, is it administrative, is it petty? You know what it is? It's scale.
Yeah.
So whether it's, name tags at a large conference, that's about scale of meeting people, noting their name, etc. You go to a restaurant and you have a written menu if the restaurant is of a certain scale. So I believe that small and medium-sized businesses need to not just think about scale for their operations, but think about scale for your communications and your teamwork, because now that when you put things on paper, the right things on paper, governed in the right way, you now minimize your marginal cost. 2, involve your 99th stakeholder, your 103rd stakeholder. Scale is so valuable, and it on and off the dance floor, right? When we have this muscle memory, it frees up your brain power so that you're no longer mired in the mechanics, reinventing the wheel, like a dancer who's constantly looking at the dance floor. So when a team can master its mechanics and how it governs its documentation, there's a formal term for it, liberating structure and a forcing function. For as long as you know your teamwork mechanics, for what is worth documenting, and how you're going to govern and have high discipline with your documentation, you free your mind up to be more creative, more empathetic, more entrepreneurial, more mischievous, more exploratory. So it's incredibly valuable to stratify your team mechanics from your team style. Stratify your team discipline from your empathy. And so I would advise small companies, don't turn your nose up at documentation, because yes, you need scale in your operations. You benefit immensely from scale in your team communications.
Absolutely. I love that you brought it back to the team internal processes, right? A lot of times especially startups and small and medium businesses, we look at our lean teams and we like to justify not having these things in place because of our size, right? I'll do it when I grow. I'll do it at the next level. And a lot of times the structure that you're building, you're still building structure, it's just not a solid foundation, right?
There's a debt. When you cut corners, we can talk about the narrow entity called tech debt, where developers cut corners and cause problems downstream for future programmers. At a larger aperture, you can talk about teams that shrug at documentation, say, we'll do it later. And you effectively penalize your future team.
Right.
We could expand the aperture even more to talk about methodology debt, where if you're executing a methodology that was conceived or formalized 25 years ago, yes, I'm looking at the Agile Manifesto, conceived 25 years ago, as a reaction to what the web was in the mid and late 90s, you have methodology debt. Why are you still tethered to this software-centric thing from 2001? The web is a little bit of a different place right now, right? So organizations that have tech debt, they have documentation debt, they have innovation debt, these huge backlogs that some Agile teams, they just hit purge, like, we'll never get to that stuff. Why do you tolerate the latency? And latency is a critical term. We can talk about it later. When you build up methodology debt, now you have this innovation debt. And so whether it's at a team altitude, a company altitude, a city, a societal altitude, there is a lot of debt. There is so much valuable innovation work to do, and we have smart, skilled people who are ready to do this work. And the job market is doing a terrible job playing matchmaker. And so one of my missions is to play matchmaker between this valuable work and these valuable workers, because teams have too many traffic jams, because we're all stuck in meetings and we're resistant, we're egotistical about the documentation. Executives and investors, they look at these traffic jams and say, why would I invest more? Why would I innovate more? Why would I hire more? So these traffic jams artificially suppress the job market. And if we can teach teams and organizations to imitate a symphony, traffic flow, not perfection, just amazing fundamentals, we can show investors and executives, hey, look at that decision symphony. Doesn't that look cool? Don't you want to innovate more and invest more in that and hire more. So this is, again, I go back to music is not cute. It is consequential. And this can help the job market by showing businesses how to synchronize and help work flow. It's incredibly financially attractive. It's about scale.
Amazing. And you're going to talk about a little bit of what you do with us today. We're going to have a presentation from Robert. So he's going to take us through that process. We're going to be able to see that. Robert, I know there's a lot of people out there who will benefit from your work, your books, your services. Tell us a little bit, how can we get in touch with you? What are some of the ways that you can add value to these teams and some of the stuff that you have on the market right now?
Thank you for asking. So I'll describe it in 3 different ways. The low maintenance, low touch way is that I have 2 books available anywhere where you buy your books online. I have 2 books available. Those are out the door. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And since I published those books in 2024, my material is not static. So I keep moving. I keep meeting my customers and my readers where they are. So I do welcome engagement on LinkedIn. And my ideas on LinkedIn continue to be more provocative and aim to move the needle, move the frontier of innovation teamwork. And then finally, I do welcome consulting work and case studies with companies who would like a little bit more handholding in converting from these traffic jams to a decision symphony. I call it converting your frustration factory into an elegant expectation factory. And if you agree with me that software is not what makes teamwork difficult, if you are ready to convert from software-centric methodologies to a trustworthiness-centric methodology, I can help you do that. So yeah, LinkedIn, books, and case studies.
Perfect. And so yeah, we're going to move into the second part of our series today, which is the presentation by Robert.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here. The session that I prepared today is titled, How Five Verbs Shapes a Decision Symphony. Many of us in teamwork find ourselves caught in back-to-back meetings, also known as communication traffic jams, decision traffic jams. Today, I'm going to show you how one simple framework, 5 verbs, helps convert your decision traffic jams into decision symphonies. One of my favorite TED Talks is a Simon Sinek session called Start With Why. Let's start with why. At the moment, we have frameworks and cultures that consciously decouple authority from accountability. You might know this framework, the 4 adjectives, RACI, also known as RACI. We'll talk about how and why RACI decouples authority and accountability. We'll talk about this acronym VUCA. You might have heard of it. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Some of our teams, some of our executives are either tolerating VUCA or they even are pro-VUCA. This undermines teamwork. So let's talk about how to solve VUCA. Because what makes teamwork difficult, it's not the code. It's not ever the code. It's not ever the software. It's our combination of competence, honesty, dependability, and benevolence. In other words, it's our trustworthiness. And too many of our teams have this repeated, systemic tolerance for untrustworthiness. Let's not accept that, and let's convert this systemic tolerance to systematic intolerance of untrustworthiness. And you see an example here of the combination of 4 possibilities where we have untrustworthiness. Also, many of us in our teams, we are reinventing the wheel. Our lessons learned feedback loop is terrible. We need to improve this. It's like nailing Jell-O to the wall. Just because you're frantic, just because you're fast, just because you call yourself agile does not necessarily mean you are disciplined. And then finally, empathy is still a buzzword, and we still leave empathy to chance. What would it mean to not leave empathy to chance? But this material is quite provocative, and I want to give psychological safety to those who are really not on board with these sorts of concepts. Some fraction of corporate America some fraction of your executives, they actually prefer the decision traffic jam. So if you are one of those people, you probably will not want to continue listening to this session. You might also have an exotic, impressive vocabulary that you want to exercise inside your project plans and your task list. There is a time and place for your impressive, exotic vocabulary. Project plan is not that place. And then finally, you might be so incredibly pro-AI that you absolutely shrug at collective human intelligence, and you feel that collective human intelligence has absolutely plateaued. And you might feel that the frontier of profitability is strictly in AI. This session takes the opposing view of that. But again, I want to give you an off-ramp if AI blocks out the sun for you. So the agenda, we're going to weave in and out of most of these concepts at different altitudes, but I at least want to plant with you the terms so you'll see, you'll recognize them as they come up in this session. The framework today that I'm presenting to you is called the Five Verbs. We might talk about the origin story, where in business school, in a supply chain operations class, was when I realized that there's value in managing a team like a factory, like an expectation factory. And we could get into that origin story. What is the logic, the thought process for converting from the RACI matrix, those 4 adjectives, to the 5 verbs? We'll talk about your asset portfolio. What exactly would your team govern with 5 verbs? And as we shape the 5 verbs plus your portfolio, we can start to shape what I call finite productivity to contrast with what many teams are caught in, infinite activity. We could talk about, well, what would a team do that's not worth governing with 5 verbs? What is everything else? What does it mean in terms of timing? So when we use the word decision symphony, let's really add the aspect of time to that work. This material is provocative, so let's get in front of the skeptics and let's anticipate what would skeptics respond to this material. I will show you one of the metaphors of this whole body of work, Innovation Elegance, is the martial art of Aikido. It is exaggerating counterproductive behavior into absurdity. So let's discuss, well, what would it mean to exaggerate counterproductive behavior in the workplace into absurdity? We'll talk about the limitations of this work, and we'll put some metrics behind it. This is not squishy material, and we absolutely can start assigning metric titles and target values to this culture. The takeaways for this session. Here you see the first glimpse of these 5 verbs. At least I'm telling you what these 5 verbs start with. And these 5 verbs, thank God, they actually create an acronym. And the acronym is Dr. RAD. But this is a single framework for you to choose that you're going to reject systemic tolerance for untrustworthiness, and instead you're going to choose systematic intolerance for untrustworthiness. I'm a dance instructor of salsa, bachata, and introductory Latin dances, and so it's very intuitive for me. So I teach mechanics of dance. I joke with my students, I do not teach style. We can do the same thing in our teamwork. We can stratify and distinguish team mechanics from our team style. Where are we standardized in our teamwork, and where are we creative and customized? And to anticipate skeptics in your workplace, I want to give you the clarity and courage to know how to exaggerate counterproductive activity into absurdity. The deep dive of this material is in 2 of my books. These 2 are available. I am working on another couple books that I'll have available in the next couple of years. Let's talk about decoupled authority and accountability. Most of you listening to this session have had multiple occasions during your career where you have felt accountable for certain work, but you did not have the corresponding authority. Ouch. It puts you at a disadvantage, and it must mean that someone else evidently has the authority without the accountability. Lucky bastards. To decouple authority and accountability is to set a team up for failure, and it sets individuals up for failure. So the framework that we formalize accountability without authority is the RACI matrix. There are numerous places on the web to educate yourself on the RACI matrix if this is a new framework to you. And we have another framework, another structure that defines formally the authority without accountability. And that framework is called the org chart. The combination of these two things formalizes and systematizes that we're going to decouple authority and accountability. What do you think is going to happen? And this is one critical reason why our project success rates have not vastly improved over the last generation. So instead of these 4 adjectives, what I'm proposing to you is that you adopt 5 certain verbs to fuse together and couple authority and accountability. Now, the logic of this translation is, for anything that your team would govern with a RACI matrix, if it's worth governing with 4 adjectives, it's going to involve 4 or more people. That if statement should not be controversial. If that piece of work is going to involve 4 or more stakeholders, it is worth documenting. Again, that in and of itself should not be controversial. Then I would conclude that if that work is worth documenting, it is actually worth governing, not with adjectives, but with verbs. Then make it idiot-proof. Then make it foolproof that the team is going to put this information on paper so that we guarantee that we're documenting this collaborative effort. 5 verbs. So here's how those 5 verbs loosely map to the RACI matrix. But we do have to put them in the right order. Again, thank goodness that there is a fun acronym for these 5 verbs. So my first request or challenge of you is, could you replace a habit? If you ever find yourself in a team that is trying to populate the RACI matrix, what would it mean to instead populate 5 verbs in a project plan to shape a decision symphony, to fuse together authority and accountability? The next question you might ask is, I don't know what to govern with 5 verbs. For purpose of this video, this image might be a little bit too small, but to give you a verbal thumbnail of what this is an inventory of approximately 20 assets, documents, deliverables that are project independent, that are worth governing with 5 verbs. Then we can get into project-specific documentation, process, people, change management, and project management deliverables. And then we can get into conventional IT and even waterfall stuff, design, build, test. These are all worth governing with 5 verbs. And to the documentation averse, then I would welcome you to treat this as a checklist of all the things that evidently you should avoid documenting. Code, design, test, training, process flows. Well, if you don't want to document them, where will those reside? Up here. We'll talk about the cost ramifications of storing your team's decisions in your head, or buried in email, or buried in meeting minutes. So this is what I call the asset portfolio. This is high discipline. It's high empathy. Imagine arriving on a team day 1 and having all this valuable documentation available to you regardless of whatever your role is on day 1. This helps teams minimize reinventing the wheel. Governing this with 5 verbs is a kind of muscle memory. The right documentation, governed with 5 verbs, is nothing short of a love letter to your future team, which you might be on. This is the legacy. This is the legacy that a responsible, disciplined, empathetic team leaves behind for its next generation. This helps us distinguish mechanics from style. For example, it's not creative that your team produces a process flow. What's creative, it's what's inside the process flow. It's not creative that your team documents a project charter. What's creative, what's stylistic, is what's inside the project charter. This helps us understand, what do we do that's worth governing? What do we do that's worth sponsoring? What do we do that's worth synchronizing into a decision symphony? And we'll talk later in more detail about, well, what is everything else? And how do we govern it, if we govern it at all? What is worth reserving time for? Holding space. We can tiptoe into the concept of finite productivity to escape this hamster wheel of infinite activity. This fuses together authority and accountability. Untrustworthy stakeholders, including executives, really dislike the 5 verbs because it means that they must sign up for a verb in a very transparent manner. So this is a form of managing up without kissing up. One of my favorite quotes is from a thought leader, an entrepreneur named John Doerr. And the quote I stole from John is, "Unacknowledged dependencies remain the #1 cause of project slippage." If your team is trying to govern itself with 20, 30, 40 different verbs, you don't have a prayer of simplifying your interdependencies, which means project slippages are going to be inevitable. It's just too awkward and cumbersome to weave together and synchronize a constantly changing inventory of 20, 30, 40 different verbs. 5 verbs helps us equate synchronization with sponsorship. Anything that's not worth governing with 5 verbs, it's not worth synchronizing, and it's not worth sponsoring. Do that work at the pub. We want to minimize latency. I don't want to rush the actual work. I don't want to tell an employee, hey, that 2 days of work, no, get it done in 4 hours. What I want to minimize is the latency. It's the time between the work. It's the time where the work is waiting for that saxophone player, that clarinet player, that tuba player to play their part. We now give everyone an amazing, very simple, straightforward way to not miss their cue. You're always going to know your cue when it's always some form of the 5 verbs. We establish a decision rhythm. It's not perfect, but it's repeatable. It's systematic. It is a forcing function. This might feel rigid. I would ask you to distinguish explicit from what's rigid, because the ink is always wet. Just because it's on paper, what that actually means is it's now easier to change our mind. 5 verbs is a liberating structure. Just like on the dance floor, my muscle memory in salsa might be quick, quick, slow, quick, quick, slow. It frees up my mind to be more creative, to be more attentive to my dance partner, to be more attentive to collisions on and off the dance floor. And we're aiming to minimize the cost to detect a problem. I want to make it as plain as possible and as pragmatic as possible to spot a problem, to minimize the cost to detect untrustworthiness, to minimize the cost to reassign for untrustworthiness. So here we have a simple equation. If you like the concept of finite productivity, I can count and I can defend 54 assets that are worth governing with 5 verbs. These 5 verbs are on 4 rows in the project plan. 54 times 4 is 216. That is my default finite productivity anytime I join an innovation ensemble, an innovation symphony. And now you, armed with that math, you now have the math, 54 times 4. If you like the concept of finite productivity, you are now empowered to disagree and calculate your own team's finite productivity. You are also free to reject the whole notion of finite productivity. What does this mean? It means you are committed and addicted to infinite activity. Many teams have instances of analysis paralysis. It is now incredibly easy to detect analysis paralysis and the solution to analysis paralysis is simply moving on to the next verb. We don't need to manage and micromanage 20, 30, 40 different verbs. And many of you have heard the cliche, smooth is fast. 5 verbs shapes a culture of smoothness. If you have 20, 30, 40 different verbs in your task list, your project plan, you have verb sprawl. This is lumpy. Lumpy is a fun word to say, but lumpy is not an easy way to be fast. Lumpy is slow. I love this quote from Chris McChesney, who wrote a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Execution's 2 best friends are simplicity and transparency. And those 2 words, simplicity and transparency, are the direct opposite of the last 2 letters of VUCA, complexity and ambiguity. So I would ask you and ask your executives, which do you want? Do you want VUCA? Do you want complexity and ambiguity? Because we have verb sprawl for that. You have RACI for that. Or you can choose simplicity and transparency, because now you have 5 verbs for that. Well, what is everything else? Well, everything else that your team might do, well, it's not worth remembering, because it's not worth 5 verbs. It's not worth sponsoring. It's not worth incentivizing. It's not worth documenting. It's not worth synchronizing. It doesn't involve your lessons learned. It's not worth reserving time. So whatever that work is, don't prohibit it, but just don't govern it. 5 verbs prevents micromanaging, and it helps you prevent over-documentation. So now I ask you the awkward choice. If you have high expectations for your teamwork, your CHI, your collective human intelligence, then you will choose finite productivity. If you're shrugging at teamwork and you've given up on collective human intelligence and you're all into AI, well, it means you have low expectations for humans. And it means you are probably hitting the record button often, generating a ton of AI-generated meeting minutes, meeting transcriptions. And you're in a comfort zone of meetings, meeting minutes, emails, Jira ticket hell, verb sprawl, constant interruptions, almost for the sake of itself. This is franticness. This is not fast. So the concept of finite productivity helps you be systematically, not perfectly, systematically intolerant of untrustworthiness. The alternative, which is where most teams are, there is systemic tolerance for untrustworthiness. Do you want your success to be systematic, or do you want to be set up to fail? The caution I have for you is that finite productivity terrifies untrustworthiness. Because when you assign the untrustworthy within 5 verbs, ask yourself, would you assign an untrustworthy individual draft? Probably not. Would you assign them review and revise? Yes. Because they're not going to want to be assigned the verb approve, because that absolutely fuses together accountability with authority. Or maybe they'll say, count me out for the contribution, I just want to be educated afterwards. That's valid. So I would ask you to mindfully consider, if you have an untrustworthy stakeholder, 5 verbs helps you place where do they belong in this symphony, if they belong in this symphony. We are coupling authority and accountability. We are coupling decision rights with decision responsibilities. The 5 verbs helps us normalize detection of untrustworthiness. It helps us normalize, pragmatize the reassignment of untrustworthiness. Nothing is rigid. It's just explicit. And now that it's on paper, we minimize the marginal cost to change our mind, to change expectations, whether it's mid-project, whether it's the next project. And because the material is governed with 5 verbs, we have now minimized the marginal cost to realign on those new expectations, minimizing the latency, the distance of time between a change and X number of people who need to understand or contribute to that change. So instead of being addicted to speed, I ask you to be addicted and obsessed with synchronization. Don't be obsessed with duration. Don't hurry your people. Be obsessed with latency. Be obsessed with the length of time between the work, where the work is just sitting there begging for an assignment. Many companies are very cost conscious, but what they do is they're cheap upfront. They minimize their upfront costs. They minimize their decision infrastructure. Instead, I would ask you to invest in decision infrastructure in order to minimize your marginal cost. Instead of being addicted to infinite activity, become obsessed with finite productivity. Reject VUCA, and I call this high discipline, high empathy. It is elegance. Let's look at the costs. If your team is addicted to meetings and addicted to email, it is absolutely understandable because of the short black bar. It's just cheap and easy to call that next meeting, show up to the next meeting. But at scale, if your team ever gets to the point where it's frustrated with meetings and meeting gridlock and email overload, that is also understandable because of the tall red bar. It is high marginal cost to sit in this high volume traffic of meetings and emails. This is a valid but unattractive cost profile for your team's communications. So of course, I'm going to ask you to invert your cost profile. This tall black bar, why is creating documentation so unpopular? It's high upfront cost. It's discipline. How many forms of discipline in human life are unpopular? Most. But then why do we generate good documentation? It's the short red bar. When we benefit from good documentation, it means we are benefiting from the low marginal cost to use that documentation. Templates. Does it feel petty? Does it feel like check the box? Well, on the dance floor, does quick, quick, slow? Is there merit to muscle memory? So I hope that you will consider the value of standardization, the value of muscle memory, the value of low marginal cost. Your team can ignore the laws of marginal cost, but the laws of marginal cost do not ignore your team. These are habits. It is muscle memory. Shared habits is what culture is. So imitating a dance couple, imitating a symphony, it's not cute. It is consequential to shape a culture of low marginal cost. Low marginal cost is pretty attractive and it's pretty mandatory for profitability. Now we have, with Five Verbs, we only have 4 different flavors of a feedback loop, which is incredibly attractive compared to the legacy conventional feedback loop where there might be dozens, 100 different places for a feedback loop to land. Because when you govern with 5 verbs, your feedback loop, the first place that a lessons learned might result in is that you change your decision bundles. You add something, you remove something, you merge something, you split something. That is a very attentive and a very straightforward change that every project can institute. The second change is the interdependencies. Maybe in one project you had A before B, and the next project you want A and B to be in parallel. That is a pragmatic and very straightforward change as part of a lessons learned. Number 3, the assignments. Hey, we assigned this to Johnny last time. This time, let's assign that verb to Monique. These are very straightforward changes that we can institute for every project. And then finally, the duration estimate. Maybe in one project you reserved 6 days for a certain activity. and you feel, we don't need to reserve that much time. Next time, let's reserve 3 days. Imagine the power and the trustworthiness when your lessons learned exercises only have 4 places to go, because everything else is a rounding error. It's not worth documenting. It's petty. So your work is either worth governing with 5 verbs, or it's worth a chat over your favorite beverage. Now we're going to try to play skeptic. You have numerous opposing forces who dislike and would push back against the notion of a decision symphony. You have colleagues who they only know infinite activity. Their comfort zone is meeting gridlock. They are absolutely obsessed and psychologically or financially invested in artificial intelligence. They like values and principles that harbor double standards, as if, well, these values and principles are for thee, not for me. Maybe they take Agile to an extreme and love incredibly tiny bundles, high-frequency releases, shrugging at the fact that frequency is not free. You might have coworkers that like to keep apart authority and accountability. You might have colleagues that love the idea of priority whiplash. You may have executives where their MBA course allowed them to specialize in what I just call hurry. This word cloud shows you the number of opposing forces that will push back against a decision symphony. There's a lot of climbership out there. Climbership is self-centric advancement, being ambitious on behalf of a very small number of people, maybe just one person. But let's not confuse or treat the same climbership from leadership. One of the final topics we'll cover in this session is the martial art of Aikido. Something counterproductive is happening. I know that actor is not accountable to me. Maybe they'll be accountable to the wall behind me. So let's explore the merits of exaggerating counterproductive behavior into absurdity. If you have a colleague who doesn't like the 5 verbs, I want to empower you with a concept I call verb sprawl. 20, 30. I have been with one of my former employers. I walked around with a physical sheet of paper that inventoried an even 100 verbs. And I would present that to the executives so that they could flex their impressive vocabulary in this unending task list that had no interdependencies. Project slippages almost was in the mission statement. And I would tease them. There's a time and place for your exotic vocabulary. Evidently, it's in the task list. So exaggerating verb sprawl into absurdity. It's exhaustive. It's exhausting. You're micromanaging. I promise you, you are reinventing the wheel. It's the spontaneous action items that form a public dumping ground of reinventing the wheels. It's high ambiguity. It's all of VUCA. It's like a dancer constantly looking at their feet, mired in the mechanics, because they can't master the mechanics. Verb sprawl hides interdependencies. It's lumpy. So again, I present this to you so that you feel empowered and you retain your sanity and lose no sleep. If you are stuck in communication traffic jams, in a frustration factory, you now have a tool to exaggerate that culture into absurdity. Does synchronization matter? Would your team like to be caught in this traffic jam? When you treat speed as a leading culture trait, you end up with franticness, you end up with saturated teams, and you end up in a communication and a decision traffic jam. If synchronization does matter to you, there's an upfront cost. Think of the high cost of this highway system that you're looking at. It's very high discipline. It's very high empathy. Every car at this speed really, really cares about the behavior of every other car next to them. But this requires you to treat speed as a lagging culture trait. The synchronization skill of the team is what dictates the speed of the team. Is this cute? Is this just semantic? I believe it's not. Because when investors and executives see these traffic jams, they hear about the saturation, executives can say, well, everyone's complaining about having too much to do. Why would I put more cars on the road? Why would I invest more? So executives and investors have a defense to innovate less, invest less, and hire less. That hurts the job market. If we can show executives and investors, look at that symphony, look at that flow. This team has found its groove. It's not perfect, but it's got muscle memory. Those investors, those executives are going to raise confidence in the rhythm of the teamwork. And those executives are going to say, I want that. That's my shiny new object. I want to invest more. I want to innovate more. I want to hire more. That helps the job market. The job market here in 2026 is doing a terrible job playing matchmaker. That is one mission of this material, is to help the job market play matchmaker. Imitating music, it's not cute. It is absolutely consequential. There's a big difference between 0 miles an hour and 30 miles an hour if and when you are stuck in traffic. It's a smaller difference to slow down a little bit, the difference between 50 and 60 miles an hour, so that we can be smooth. Smooth is fast. So today I presented to you the framework that is the 5 verbs. This is discipline. This is a RACI with teeth. RACI has no teeth. RACI is nailing Jello to the wall. RACI is CYA, and RACI is a false sense of governance. RACI's been around a long time. Harbors a lot of ambiguity. Not solving your biggest problems should not be sacred. RACI is one of around 20 things that should not be sacred that are still taught in conventional IT and in innovation. RACI is just one thing. So today, I presented to you this framework that helps you shape gears of what I call an elegant expectation factory. Not in this session are 10 tools, templates, that serve as the lubrication for these teeth, for these gears. This is discipline and empathy. This is not AI. This says, I have not given up on my team. There's IHI, individual human intelligence, certifications, diplomas, that's great. But what this material is CHI. It is collective human intelligence, and this is where I'd like the hype to be. This is an exciting place. The world of improv teaches us, none of us is as smart as all of us. AI is smarter than me, but AI is not smarter than 10 of us. Does AI know my current state better than my team? No. Does AI know my future state better than my team and my stakeholders? No. That thread of breadcrumbs should tell you that collective human intelligence is where the hype should be. There are metrics behind this. For purpose of this session, I won't go into detail, but if you are metrics-minded, I'm delighted to show you this, teach you this, and there is a LinkedIn article that details what and why are these 11 metrics, and there's actually a 12th metric that I've thought of since I published this. So thank you for your time and attention. I do have 2 books on this material, and I hope you'll be in touch via LinkedIn or any way you see fit. Oh, let's do a call to action. I would ask you to choose, which way do you want to turn? Do you want to stay on a path of systemic tolerance for untrustworthiness? I hope that you will choose systematic intolerance, teeth, trustworthiness. That's the path I hope you will choose. Master your mechanics. Be magnificent at the mundane. The 5 verbs helps you be brilliant at the basics and fabulous at the fundamentals. On or off the dance floor, that is an incredible place to be. Master your mechanics so that you are fearless in the empathy, in the entrepreneurship, your styling, and what you bring to the market and to your team. A dance director here in Chicago used to ask us, don't just rehearse until you get it right. Rehearse until it's hard to get it wrong. We don't have to be perfect, but we can strive for systematic trustworthiness and not leave trustworthiness to chance. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Thank you, Robert, for being with us today. We have learned a lot. You've shared a lot of content with us and opportunities, right? Whether it's through your books or through your consulting services, there's a lot of opportunities for us to connect with Robert, connect with his message, and to better our business. Thank you guys for always tuning in. This is Inner Access. We are here to serve small and medium businesses, and we're providing you with insights that we could actually get actual outcomes for. So stay tuned for what's next.